Hello, I'm Mr. Simonetti. I'm on the bottom of your screen.
This is Mr. Antonoro on the top of your screen.
And this is part 2 of U.S. History Review. Part 1 took you from the 13 colonies all the way up to the end of Washington's presidency. Part 2 is going to take you from the Louisiana Purchase all the way up to the end of the Civil War. And remember, that's in 15 minutes or less, guaranteed.
And today we're going to start with the great Thomas Jefferson. Do you know anything about Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Simonetti?
Yes, I do. I remember that he strictly interpreted the Constitution, meaning he was against the Elastic Clause.
Yes, unlike Alexander Hamilton, who used the Elastic Clause, as you recall from our first episode, to create the National Bank.
So then what is so great about Jefferson? Did he do anything important as a president?
Well, did he do anything important?
Well,
Jefferson's greatest achievement is the Louisiana Purchase.
oh, he bought that little state where they have Mardi Gras?
Little state. In fact, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States.
Wow, what do you mean doubled? Up until that point, what was the United States?
Well, when we were under the British did not want any of the colonists to move past the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, is that this area right here on the map?
Yes, it is. In fact, that was called the Proclamation Line of 1763.
But why couldn't we move past those mountains?
Well, the British didn't want the colonists to come into any conflicts with the natives.
Oh, okay, I got that.
But that was just one of the many things the British did to the colonists that angered them.
All right, then who did we buy Louisiana from?
Well, the French, of course. And you might have heard of him. You know that leader, Napoleon?
I have heard of Napoleon. He makes a pretty good dessert, too.
Well, Napoleon offered to sell the territory to the United States at a bargain price, and Thomas Jefferson could not pass it up. Okay?
Wait, so you tell me, bada bing, bada boom, he bought Louisiana?
No, he was reluctant at first because he strictly, as we said, interpreted the Constitution.
So what does that have to do with buying Louisiana?
Well, the Constitution doesn't say anything. The president can acquire more territory and expand the country.
So you're telling me that Thomas Jefferson, one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, a founding father, was a hypocrite?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But if he really stuck to his principles, he would have never purchased Louisiana.
So he used the Elastic Clause.
Well, yes, and he also signed it as a treaty, which under the Constitution, the president does have treaty-making powers.
Oh, that's why in that picture on the bottom, it looks like they're signing a document.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So did we gain anything from buying Louisiana?
Yes, the most important gain was the Mississippi River. Now, why do you think the Mississippi River would be so important to the nation?
More drinking water?
Not only drinking water, but also trade.
Wow, you're right. And doesn't the Mississippi River go all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico?
Yes, and the important port city of New Orleans also we had access to now thanks to the Louisiana Purchase. And in addition to the Mississippi River, we also now continue to expand westward, okay, which will continue in the next few years that we will talk about.
Wow, I'm looking at this map, and it looks like we doubled in size by buying Louisiana. I thought Louisiana was that little state right down here. But it's actually, back then, basically the middle of the country, all the Great Plains and everything else. You really do learn something new every day. So then, who was president after Jefferson?
Well, after Jefferson, we have James Madison, who I believe is one of your favorite presidents.
Yeah, short guys got to stick together.
And after James Madison was James Monroe, and he's the last of the presidents of the Virginia dynasty.
I don't know much about Monroe. I've never even heard of him before.
You never heard of James Monroe? I'm disappointed.
No, was he married to Marilyn? I mean...
Well, James Monroe, he was with George Washington during the crossing of the Delaware. James Monroe also was one of the signers of the treaty that got us Louisiana Purchase. And James Monroe was also the president during the era of good feelings. He was elected by crushing margins, okay, to the presidency. And he's known as the creator of the Monroe Doctrine.
What is the Monroe Doctrine?
Well, the Monroe Doctrine warned Europe at the time to not try to come back into our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, and recolonize.
Oh, so basically he told them, hands off our land.
Yes, now we didn't have the force or the power to enforce it at the time, but this doctrine will become very important later on towards the end of the century.
So it's like playing poker, and Europe never called his bluff.
Yes.
So we could have gone to war and lost badly if they crossed that ocean. What ocean is this again?
Oh, the Atlantic Ocean.
Map skills, not really taught anymore.
And this doctrine really shows that now we are really stepping up and having this pride in our country now, where we can assert ourselves for the first time.
But I thought he said the entire Western Hemisphere. We're not the only country in the Western Hemisphere.
No, in fact, we're trying in this case to protect Latin America, and this doctrine will lead to a special relationship that we felt that we had with Latin America, and that we would protect them and even, in fact, police the countries down in Latin America. But as I said, we're getting ahead of ourselves. That'll become more important later on in the century.
Then after Monroe, who's like the next important president we could talk about?
Andrew Jackson, the first common man to be elected to the presidency. Old Hickory.
I heard he was one bad mofo.
Well, Andrew Jackson, yes. He was a war hero from the Battle of New Orleans, a so-called Indian fighter. He challenged men to duels. He was a tough guy. I don't think I'd want to fight Andrew Jackson.
Was he related to Samuel?
No, he was.
No, Samuel L., not the guy who makes... Yeah, Samuel L., okay, yeah. I thought you were thinking of Sam Adams.
Oh, no, not Sam Adams.
Okay. So what did Andrew Jackson do that made him such a tough, strong leader?
Well, probably one of the saddest chapters in American history. He kicked the Cherokees off of their land in Georgia on the forced march called the Trail of Tears.
Why would he do that?
Well, he claimed that the natives would be safer if they were moved off to Oklahoma and other places out in the West.
Well, but what was so great about the land that he took over?
Well, there were people in Georgia that wanted that land because gold was found on that land. And this was one of the few times where the president ignored a Supreme Court ruling which actually protected the Native Americans' land in Georgia. But Andrew Jackson, as we said, didn't care about things like Supreme Court rulings, and he just ignored the ruling.
Oh, wow. Did he do anything else?
Yeah, he's known for the spoils system, which he gave jobs to his loyal supporters. He created the kitchen cabinet, this informal group of advisors that would sneak in through the kitchen of the White House. He also threatened to hang leaders down in South Carolina if they did not pay the tariff.
Isn't that the tax on imports?
Yes.
Why wouldn't they want to pay it? It's a law. You have to pay taxes.
Well, Southerners did not really like the tariff because they believed that it raised prices of their goods at the expense of the North, who Northerners were making a lot of money off of the tariff because it protected all the goods that were being manufactured. And if you remember from the last lesson, I think we talked about the protective tariff.
We did, I remember.
And
how Alexander Hamilton created it.
Yeah, and it encouraged home manufacturing. So Northerners loved it. Southerners did not want to pay the tariff, but they had no choice with Andrew Jackson. He threatened to hang those leaders. And he vetoed the bank bill. Okay, matter of fact, Andrew Jackson, the people say, killed the National Bank.
Didn't he use more vetoes than all the presidents before him combined?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Now, do you remember what veto means?
Doesn't that mean to strike down a bill that was created by Congress?
Yeah. And why is that so important to have the veto power?
That's to prevent tyranny, right? That's kind of checks and balances at its best.
Wow, you really remember the last lesson.
You're a great teacher, Mr. Antonoro. So I keep hearing, though, that the United States believed in manifest destiny back then, but no one will tell me what that means.
Well, manifest destiny means that the United States was destined, okay, or had the right given to us by God to expand from coast to coast, or as you probably heard the phrase, sea to shining sea.
Oh, so it's like westward expansion. We keep moving out west.
Yeah, now, do you think, though, expansion was totally a positive thing for our country?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that could happen because of expanding. What about the whole issue of whether or not slavery would expand?
Wow, you're leading us right into the next topic.
Well, that's why I'm the king of the segues.
The Mexican War, okay, and because of expansion and U.S. expansion, we became involved in conflicts. not only with Native Americans who lived on a lot of land in the West, but also Mexico, who at the time controlled most of the areas in the Southwest.
So you're telling Mexico used to be a powerful country?
Yes, and matter of fact, we took so much land from Mexico, including important states that we now have today, like California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Nevada and Utah.
And Texas too?
Texas too.
Wait, but Texas and California are our two most populated states. They have the most members in the House of Representatives.
Wow, yes, you're right.
Wow, so that had to be controversial. I mean, what do we do with all this new land? Did it lead to any disputes?
Yes, in fact, the biggest dispute over these
You got to
new
keep
lands-
up with the segues, Antonoro.
You're so good at segues, I can't keep up. The biggest dispute at the time was over slavery. Okay, while southern states wanted slavery to expand into the Southwest, as a matter of fact, many of them, thanks to the Missouri Compromise, anticipated that it would definitely expand into the Southwest. But there were Northerners that opposed the spread of slavery, okay, into these new Western territories.
Wasn't the Missouri Compromise that line that no states north of could have slavery?
Yes, so Southerners assumed all states below the line of 36th parallel, okay, would have slavery.
Well, besides slavery, did anything else divide the country?
Sure. Well, we already mentioned the tariff, which Northerners wanted, and Southerners wanted a lower tariff, okay, and slavery is the other major issue, okay, that divided the North and the South. Now, there were other issues of sectionalism that came up, like the Dred Scott case. Okay. Do you remember anything about the Dred Scott case?
Wasn't he a slave who went north? I'm assuming he crossed the Missouri Compromise line, and then he thought when he was up north that he was free, and his owner said, "No, you're not," and they went to the Supreme Court.
Yes, and this was a case, the Dred Scott case, where unfortunately the Supreme Court did not protect minorities, and they ruled that slaves are property and as such can be taken anywhere into the territories.
So it sounds like there are a lot of differences between the North and the South. What was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back?
The election, of course, of the great Abraham Lincoln in 1860.
Well, what was so controversial about that? He's one of the greatest presidents ever.
Well, as you can see on the map, there were no southern states that voted for Lincoln. In fact, Lincoln wasn't on the ballot in most of these southern states.
So he was kind of like just the president for the North.
Yeah, so Southerners got very angry at Lincoln's election, especially because Lincoln did not want slavery to spread anywhere into the Western territories.
Oh, wow. So because he got elected, they broke off of the Union and we had a civil war.
Yes, they seceded in 1860 and 1861. The southern states, they tried to form their own country, but Lincoln wouldn't have it.
All right, so then during the war, isn't his goal to end slavery?
No, not to end slavery. Students always make that mistake, and they trick you on the Regents. Lincoln's primary goal is to protect and preserve the Union.
Oh, by the Union, you mean the North?
Well, by the Union, I mean the North and the South. Lincoln wants to bring the South back into the country so that we're reunited again. Now, to do so, he realizes in the course of the war, one way to preserve the Union is to free the slaves.
How would that preserve the Union? That's what separated them.
Well, the Northerners now would have a reason to fight this war. And now, what is the war about if Lincoln is freeing the slaves?
What is it about? Well, isn't it about slavery?
Yes, the war is not only about slavery, but now the war is about freedom and equality. And now Northerners will have a strong reason to fight and participate in this war.
And that's why the 13th Amendment comes after the Civil War.
Yes.
It ends slavery.
So is it all making sense now?
Now it is. So then the North wins the war, and what happens next? I mean, the South can't be too happy.
Well, we need to put our country back together. Many lives were lost during the Civil War. Many areas of the South were destroyed, and we need to reconstruct the nation.
So what's Lincoln's plan?
Well, Lincoln had more of a lenient plan. He felt the best way to heal the nation was to forgive the South, okay, with malice towards none were his words, okay. Unfortunately, Lincoln was assassinated, and we never were able to find out what his plan would, or what would have happened with his plan. Instead, Congress now took over Reconstruction, and their plan was a lot more radical. They wanted to give more rights to slaves or ex-slaves. All right, and it created a lot of bitterness in the South.
Wow. We did it in 50.